Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, and this week we are talking about Pro Tour Thunder Junction. And who better to come and talk us through the tournament, the cards, the players, the teams, all of that jazz, but two of the folks who will be guiding you through the Pro Tour itself, Corey and Ali. Welcome. Good morning, you two.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning,
No
Blake.
howdy
Thanks for having
forever,
us.
Blake?
I have scars from living in Texas for quite a while. It's like this mental stop where I can't say it, or I have problems saying y'all too. Anyway, we're not gonna get into.
Well, don't worry.
We're not gonna get into
Don't worry. I
my
brought
trauma.
my tiny hat. Don't worry.
Good
I brought my
job.
tiny cowboy hat just in case here
Just
to
a little
yeehaw up the
festivity.
stream.
So glad somebody's on it. So today we are going to talk about the Pro Tour, which is starting this Friday. If you're at home, you're going to be able to watch it on twitch.tv/magic. This very channel that you're watching it right now, that's going to be happening this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 26th through the 28th. You can see all those time zones there. Check it out on twitch.tv/magic. We are going to be doing Outlaws of Thunder Junction draft, which by all accounts is fantastic. And we're going to be playing quite a bit of Standard. So we are going to start by talking about Standard, which Corey, all accounts is a varied and interesting place to be these days.
Yeah, Standard's at a really fun spot. You know, it was a lot of fun before OTJ, and now I think OTJ has enough really powerful cards that we're going to see existing archetypes kind of get a boost. And I know there's plenty of testing teams out there testing some new brews. Even this late in Standard, which you don't normally see too many new additions, this set has so many powerful cards that I wouldn't be too shocked to see one of these, big testing teams come and kind of break it and show something new.
Well, I mean, we did just see that at the last Pro Tour where a single card kind of upended Pioneer, which is an even more established metagame.
Yep. Veins were
Vein
ripped.
ripper.
And
Yeah.
that was super awesome to see. If any team can do it back to back, it's going to be these Ultimate Guard teams. It's going to be Team Handshake and any of the other bigger teams like that. So, yeah, it's going to be really exciting to watch.
So let's start by taking a look, Corey, at where the Standard metagame is now, right? Yep. Well, not now, right before OTJ. People are already starting to incorporate it, but before OTJ, what did we have going on?
Yeah, so starting at the top, Dimir Mid-range and Esper Mid-range definitely share a lot of the same cards. These are going to be decks that are playing these aggressive strategies that play, Preacher of the Schism, Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, Shieldred, and then has really great spells to kind of back their game plan up with. Cut down, go for the throat, make disappear, some of the most efficient pieces of removal and counter spells. This is definitely the mid-range deck of the format. Something we're very much going to see from these two decks, at least as far as additions go with OTJ. I mean, there's some exciting Dimir cards. We have Gisa the Hellraiser, Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, plenty of really, really spicy Dimir style and Esper mid-range cards, as well as another big one for Esper mid-range, Blake, is Rest in Peace in the sideboard is going to give that deck kind of a shot in the arm to combat some of the more popular graveyard strategies.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at a couple of the deck lists so we can see kind of the baseline of what we're working with. So this is a sample Dimir mid-range. These are all taken from Frank Carson's metagame preview on magic.gg. So talk a little bit more about what's going on here.
Yep, so like I was saying, just kind of the go-to mid-range deck. You have Fairy Mastermind, as well as Deep Cavern Bat, Spyglass Siren. All these really cheap, evasive attackers that you can combine with Gix to be able to gain a bunch of card advantage, to make sure that you can just have way more cards than your opponent and back it up with counter spells, either make disappear or some disdainful strokes, negate, spell pierce, those kind of cards against control, and then just have a plethora of removal for the aggressive decks. Go for the throat, cut down, And the nice thing about these style of decks, these Dimir midrange and the Esper midrange decks, is they don't have any tremendously bad matchups going into the format. Everything is very malleable. You can really change your deck to be better against control, to be better against aggro. They did kind of have one natural predator here in the metagame, and this was the Teamer Analyst deck. But now that we're going to see with Rest in Peace, man, it really hurts to see one extremely powerful strategy be shut down so badly with just one sideboard card in the form of Rest in Peace. It pains me to see Blake and Ailey because Teamer Analyst here, this deck is so much fun. It kind of reminds me of like Teamer Reclamation days in Standard. It's that powerful, but with just one sideboard card, now seemingly being played in every sideboard, it's a lot rougher times for putting in a lot of lands.
It is such a, it's such a weird, different deck too. It's not something we've seen much of.
Yeah. This deck is really sweet. I'm looking forward to seeing if anyone brings this, and if so, what they're, how they're going to adapt to Rest in Peace, knowing that that's in the sideboard. Are they going to try and find a different win con other than 20 damage to the face? Time will tell.
Yeah. That's the one thing that I think is the most interesting with these strategies that have like an all-in game plan, game one, kind of looking like Dredge. I think this is a very good comparison to modern Dredge back in the day and this Teamer deck, where game one, you just have such an outrageously over-the-top game plan against most of the metagame. And then games 2 and 3 get a little rougher. They bring in these high-impact sideboard cards, makes it a lot tougher to win. In non-open deckless tournaments, I think it's very easy to just say, hey, I'll make a transformational sideboard. I'll put in some big dragons or something like that and try to win that way. That's not the case at the Pro Tour. It is open deckless, so any tricks you're trying to bring will be known by your opponent and they can sideboard accordingly.
Yeah. Do you think there are, Teamer Analyst is a very specific kind of deck, but do you think there's anything in OTJ that could help it overcome Rest in Peace?
I think there's some interesting cards. Colossal Rattleworm, I think, could be like a nice pivot, being able to just have a flash threat if you want to play some deserts like that. Some other cards that are just gigantic that you can be trying to pivot with like that as well. I believe the giant Bonnie Pal Clear Cutter.
Yeah,
that's an extremely...
the cow lady.
Yes, the cow lady. I think something like this really, goes with the theme of the deck where you want a lot of lands. But the problem with this is you still need your graveyard to get yourself a bunch of lands, and other decks want to bring in counter spells against you already. So being gigantic creatures going down that avenue might not be the way to go. So I'm really interested to see what the pros do with this deck, or if it's just completely ignored going into the Pro Tour.
Yep. Yeah, we don't have much data since OTJ before the Pro Tour, but there was one event on MitGo that Teamer Analyst was completely shut out of.
I'm kind of not surprised because we've seen with each new release or just before a new release, people like to get fancy. So they try the new hotness for a while, but then it's kind of just a flash in the pan. So I don't know, Teamer Analyst might be that. And if I was competing this weekend, I probably would just go with something that's a little bit more, tried and trusted, like the Dimir or Esper midrange, because, those work, kind of like how Rakdos was just the deck not too long ago. Now Esper and Dimir are filling that slot for sure.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Esper always kind of overperforms at these events too, because, well, one thing that Pro Tour players want, the best players in the world, they want agency over their game. They don't want to play these Teamer Analyst deck and be like, well, they had Rest in Peace, so I guess I'm out of the tournament. That's a bad feeling after you've been testing for 2 weeks. You're sitting on the flight, and I've had this feeling too many times. You're sitting on the flight home, you're like, why didn't I just play the good deck? Why did I try to play this fancy deck that I had a hot week with, and it gets to be a little frustrating, Blake.
Well, then I have a question for you following up there. Looking at Boros Convoke, do you think that is the kind of deck that feels bad up against the Esper and Dimir list as well?
No,
you don't really have agency over...
No, I think that deck is actually pretty good. There's some new tools as well in that deck that give it a little bit more agency. The one colorless red, deal 2, you can sacrifice an artifact to put in a golem from one of the bonus sheets there. I forget the card name. That card actually gives you some ability to play at your opponent's end step. Usually these Boros Convoke decks, these hyper-aggressive creature decks, if they cast Sunfall, you pack them up and you go on to game 2, but maybe now with this kind of ability to put some creatures in at end step, I think it has good game against the Esper and Dimir. It got destroyed by the Teamer decks, so it was kind of on the decline before OTJ, but now with Teamer kind of plummeting down, I would imagine Convoke will have a rightful spot in the top 3 decks in the metagame, would be my guess.
Sweet.
Let's take a look at the Boros Convoke list. Again, pre-OTJ, you know, obviously one of the biggest additions is just the fast land, just getting a new land for this deck. But what else does Boros Convoke potentially gain from OTJ?
Yeah, so what I was saying, the one red artifact, I gotta find the name of that card. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Legion Extruder. I think this is a nice addition that I've been seeing pop up in a couple of lists. Being able to sacrifice your clues, sacrifice your blood token, stuff like that, as well as just have a little bit of reach from the damage. I think this is one of the bigger players. But I also don't think Convoke gets too much different cards because, well, you can't really change too many cards from this deck. Otherwise, your deck isn't really functioning. If you're playing these 2-mana cards that don't put any creatures into play, how are you convoking your Knight Errant of Eos? Stuff like this. Yeah. I think these Boros Convoke decks are going to be very similar to Collected Company decks that we've seen in the past. You can sideboard in like 2 or 3 cards, but you can't dramatically change your configuration. Otherwise, your deck doesn't function like it should.
All right, one of the other decks we should talk about is a deck that was previously at the top of the metagame, up there with Esper and Dimir, which is Domain Ramp, which seems to have fallen off a little bit.
Yeah, Domain Ramp is definitely a deck that's just doing its thing, right? You're trying to ramp, you have your early Topiary Stomper into your battle.
Invasion.
I guess, I guess Invasion, okay, there it is, a couple of them. You don't play all 4 these days anymore. Like, you still have that really aggressive start. You have the over-the-top top end with Atraxa, and you're able to beat creature decks pretty well, but yeah, it just didn't really get any new toys here, so it's a deck that's still going to be fine. It'll still be probably top 5, top 7 decks in the metagame, but nothing too flashy with this deck.
All right. Speaking of not flashy, let's talk about Golgari Mid-range. Rob, it's
good cards go.
Here. Good cards go. What is this deck trying to do besides just cast all the good cards?
Yeah, this is really just the ultimate Reed Duke special here. If this deck's remotely good, Reed Duke will be playing it. So if it's not played by Reed, it's probably not good enough. I think that's a good test of the deck straight away, but it reminds me a lot of Dimir Mid-range. I think it's going to overlap with a lot of cards there. It's just if decks want to be better against creature decks, then you play Golgari. If you expect a lot more Convoke, a lot more Monor Red, Golgari is going to be the way to go. But if you want to have more game against Domain, Teamer, Analyst, and stuff, there's going to be more argument to being able to play Make Disappear, Disdainful Stroke, or even Rest in Peace in Esper. I kind of have a feeling that Dimir is going to not really exist anymore, and I think it's all going to be transferred over to Esper just because of Rest in Peace. It's such a huge sideboard card here, and these Dimir mid-range, these Esper mid-range pre-Rest in Peace, keep going back to the Teamer deck, but the Teamer deck was really shaking up the format right before OTJ came out, and it kind of destroyed those decks without Rest in Peace. So I would think Golgari is going to be a deck as well that's going to fall to the wayside in favor of blue cards and white cards for Rest in Peace. Sadly, I love the deck. Don't get me wrong.
Now, if this deck were to get played, is there anything that from OTJ that keeps people in Golgari colors?
Crimes.
Gisa. Commit some crimes. Yeah, Ailey's got it. I think Gisa the Hellraiser, as well as maybe Tiny Bones the Pickpocket. The one thing about Tiny Bones that is quite strong is if you're on the play with Tiny Bones, you go turn 1 that, they go turn 1 nothing. You go turn 2 land go, they go turn 2 creature, and you're able to go for the throat it and then untap and put that creature into play. This is kind of a mid-range player's dream, you know, maybe like a Regavan at home here for standard. I think this card could have a good weekend.
I was not initially a believer in this card, but then I got to pickpocket a Rafine, and just everything was right in the world after that.
That seems gross. That seems gross.
Okay, I want to talk about 2 more archetypes before we talk about draft. And then for the people following along at home, we're going to come back to OTJ, and we're going to talk about a bunch of OTJ cards that may make an impact either in these archetypes or creating new ones. But before we do that, let's talk about the last 2 aggressive archetypes on this metagame breakdown. Monor Red Aggro and then Bant Toxic.
Okay, yeah, Monor Red Aggro, I think, is actually at a pretty interesting spot because, well, this is a card, sorry to spoil it here for a little bit later. This is probably the card in OTJ that is the most hyped, maybe the best in air quotes here, and that's Slick Shot Show Off. Slick Shot Show Off is doing exactly that. It's showing off over every constructed format right now. It's making it all the way to modern. You know, it's kind of dominating Pioneer. I think that's a card that's really going to give these mono red decks a big upgrade here. And I think mono red was already pretty good. If you go Kamano faces Kakazan into Gadwick, I believe it is called, to just make
Godric.
it a 4/4 Godric, thank you. Just to make that dragon or make that creature turn into a dragon on turn 3 naturally as you play it when Kamano faces Kakazan flips. That's already one of the most powerful things you could be doing in standard. And I think this is going to be a deck that I would say some of the players that maybe are not on a testing team, they don't have a ton of practice with a deck. They're just going to want to play a deck that is very proactive, very powerful, and will give them a chance up against the best players in the world. Because I know, you know, I've been there in the spot where I'm like, well, I'm getting ready for one of my first Pro Tours. Do I want to play an Esper mirror match against, you know, Billy Jensen or Reed Duke or anything like that? It's like, no, probably not. I want to play some aggressive cards and try to, just kill my very skilled Magic player opponents before they get a chance to get their feet in.
Try get an edge anywhere you can, especially if you're not on a team like you mentioned, because I have seen what these teams prep, how they prep, everything that they're organizing. I got to sneak into one of the big teams' Discords, and let me tell you, those guys are organized. You think people just show up and play Magic? No.
No.
That is not the case.
It's a whole new game, the way they play, especially with OTJ Limited kind of being released, I would say maybe like a week later than we usually get here in the last year or so. That makes it even more beneficial for these teams that have 8 friends that meet up in Seattle to draft around a table, because you can play on Arena, you can play, on Mitgo and play in these 8-man pods. It's not the same when you're playing against these high caliber players in an in-person draft where you're not getting these busted uncommons 5th pick. So it's a huge advantage to teams for sure.
That's one of the big things about the Pro Tour too, that, surprises me even after doing this for however many years. The draft portion never goes how you have experienced a draft online.
Yeah.
They make such interesting decisions, which you sit there scratching your head at. Meanwhile, they're thinking 3 picks down the line already because they know that person over there is in those colors and he's your first opponent, stuff like that. So it's really cool to watch. So definitely tune in for that. If nothing else, draft. Okay.
Well, that's actually a really good transition for us. Haley, this draft environment, I've seen a ton of positive reviews about it. I haven't been winning a ton, but it's fun. Sick. My first draft, I kid you not, I had Cruel Ultimatum and Thoughtseize in the deck, and I didn't do very well. But
Did you go for it though?
But it was awesome. I did
Yeah,
the thing.
you gotta go for it, right?
I cast Cruel Ultimatum and lost the next turn. It was wonderful.
You didn't
but-
you didn't channel your inner Gabriel Nassif and really Cruel Ultimatum your opponent. Huh?
We've learned a little bit more about what the format's about since then. So, Ailey, what is the format about besides trying to Cruel Ultimatum people?
It kind of feels almost like a cube draft because of the bonus sheets that are added to this format. You know, there's just so many unexpected ways that this can go. We've seen historically in certain formats, it's pick blue and black and you'll win most of the time. This one is great. There's so many different things you can do. The fixing is awesome. You know, the Deserts deck allows you to basically just pick up all of the great cards that people aren't fetching or aren't taking because they're in certain colors. So it feels a lot more... a lot slower than the previous draft formats.
Definitely.
So you can actually play around a bit more. You know, I want to say it kind of feels like Kaldheim a little bit, where you get to spin your wheels a bit and do the cool thing. You know, and I really like that.
All right.
Yeah,
Are there any archetypes that are early leaders for some of the best in the format?
Saddle up, cowboy. I think Selesnya is pretty darn good. That saddle mechanic confused the heck out of me the first time I saw it. I'm like, wait, do I put the clock? Yeah. Anyway, it's basically just crew, but yeah, it's sweet. You know, the extra abilities onto the saddled creatures that you get once they are saddled. Like, I think that's really powerful. You know,
Miriam.
if you look at this this signpost on common here, Miriam. Like, you're giving your stuff hexproof is excellent. Putting counters on it, it's so good. I haven't gotten to play her yet, so I need to get a couple more drafts into hopefully crack her. But yeah, that's a very fun one to do. And I mean, I'm a sucker for spells. I kind of like casting a bunch of stuff. So plot's very cool too. The Izzet decks, I've done terribly with all of them, but they're fun. They're so fun.
Same. Keep trying.
Oh, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think Selesnya was definitely my favorite as well. That's the one I've had the most success with. I think just the uncommons in that color pair is just through the roof. Like, there's really no bad uncommons in green-white. They really work well together. Plus, you have Mystical Tether and Throw from the Saddle as the common, really top-shelf removal spells with that. There's a lot to love in green-white, but that's the thing. OTJ just gives you the ability to really draft anything, and like Ailey was saying, you have the time to really develop a battlefield. It's not hyper-aggressive. Some people really love hyper-aggressive formats. I like them a little slower, so you have this ability to, you know, just play a long game and try to not make sure your deck just has 10 2-drops, 9 3-drops. You know, you get to explore and go a little bigger. And OTJ is a 10 out of 10 for me. It was just a complete home run. I've been having the most fun ever prepping for this Pro Tour.
Yeah. And even the pro players, like, we've seen a bunch of them on Twitter. No, I will not call it X. You know, praising the set as one of the best limited formats that we've had in a while. So I think the players this weekend are very spoiled. You know, 2 great formats. It's going to be an awesome show.
Yeah. It's another Dave Humphreys special. That's, you know, his draft formats, they always
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys.
He hits it out of the park every single time. Every time he's the lead, it's just always home runs.
Just can't miss. All right. Before we start talking more specifically about Outlaw of Thunder Junction cards added to the format, Ailey, we've had one player who is on a streak like no other. Tell us what is going on with Simon Nielsen. Is he human?
No.
Has
I don't
AI
think
finally
so
advanced that far? Like,
you know, a couple of years back when Nathan Stoyer was on his hot streak, we were like, hell yeah, must be the best run in the world. And Simon Nielsen's like, I'll hold my lasso or Stetson or whatever. Because he has done 4 consecutive top finishes, which is, you know, unmatched in Magic's history. If he goes for a 5th, the chances of anyone topping that is like slim to none. Absolutely incredible. He was the player of the year for 2023. And yeah, he's just an absolute delight to play against, to interview. Like, yeah, he's one of the best players at the moment and probably of all time. You know,
And
if
just
he,
what
if
a
he
great
carries on the way he's going, yeah.
And just such a great ambassador for the game. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there's nobody that loves to play Magic as much. There's nobody that, like, when he loses, he's just like, well, that was an awesome game. Like, I had so much fun. You know, even at these huge stake tournaments where some of us might be like really, you know, hand in head, kind of bummed about the thing. He's up there giving Seth a hug after Seth won the Pro Tour here, after he beat Simon in the finals. Just nothing but good things to say about Simon. A great representative for Magic the Gathering and what pro Magic players should look like.
Yeah.
Corey, that game we cast with Simon Nielsen versus Christopher Larson, that is the funniest. I have not laughed so much in such a high stakes matchup before. Do yourselves a favor and go watch that game. It's so funny. Oh, I couldn't keep it together.
I couldn't either. It was amazing. The only time a match has ever went to 7 games because there was a lot of draws with Amalia. And also their 2 Danish friends. I've had the great joy of testing with both of them for a long time. And that's how they play Magic when they're just sitting around the table casually. It was really funny to see them transition to playing the exact same way in the top 4 of a Pro Tour with $50,000 on the line. I was laughing so hard. Does that say Danes don't block? Yep.
No block, only smack.
So funny.
All
right, let's call some shots here. Does Simon get his 5th consecutive top 8?
Yes.
Wow. I don't know.
He has to lose to 5. I think Rich Hagan worked it out for us, so I might be lying here. But he has to lose 5 times over the course of the weekend. Matchups.
Yeah.
If someone does that, or if someone can take him out 5 times, then he won't make his top 8. He's been winning a lot lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but yeah, it depends. I don't know what he's playing yet. I hope it's something good. If it's something good and he has great drafts, top 8, number 5. Here we go.
And that's the thing is, you know, he's testing with Team Handshake once again. They're gonna have a good deck. They're gonna have a good strategy. But I mean, maybe I'll be a little bit more skeptic because once, you know, top 8 Pro Tour once is super hard. Like if you put the best player in the world and the best player at the moment, which is undoubtedly Simon Nielsen, the odds that you top 8 one of these 250, 300-ish person tournaments with the best players is still maybe like, what, 8% or something? You still have to run good. You have to play well. You have to have some things cut your way. Simon has to show up for round 1 of the draft as well. He cut it really close. He cut it really close at the last one and then still managed to 3-0 his draft. There's a lot of variables that go into it, so I'm going to be a skeptic. He'll still cash the Pro Tour 100%, but top 8ing another one, I got to go with the odds. The odds would probably say probably not, but
boo this man,
it's gotta end at some point. All right, I'll boo myself. Boo.
Not this week.
Ailey can have some sick bragging rights over Corey at the end of this.
She always does. She always does. She's the better Magic player in our duo for sure.
No.
All right, let's move on to talking about Outlaws of Thunder Junction and its impact on the format. Now, we've already talked about some of this, but we're going to talk about some individual cards. The first thing we have, so just before the set released on Arena, we had a streamer event. And in that event, we can check and see what were the most played cards from OTJ at Mythic, Rare, Common, Uncommon. So we've got a few graphics, and we can talk about some of these cards. So these are the most played cards at Mythic in the streamer event. We've already talked about a couple of these, but how do we feel about these 5 cards?
So,
I love these.
yeah, they're all extremely powerful cards, and I think some of them will make their way into Standard. One thing I will say about the streamer events is a lot of people experimenting with a lot of different cards. Yeah. So we'll see if there's really something like a shell for Bristly Bill or Railroad Brawler. I mean, some of the best limited cards in the set, no doubt. But it's just if there is a aggressive green deck that wants to play those. You know, Golgari Mid-range being the number 1 home that I would think for these cards to be able to make that kind of impact for the deck. It'll be just a question if green is good. Green has been pretty historically the worst color here in Standard for at least the last couple rotations. But Tiny Bones, Gisa, I definitely think will have a place. And I haven't seen a Terror of the Peaks deck yet, but we've seen this card dominate Standard here in the past, as this is a reprint that is coming back to terrorize your Standard metagame. And I think that one could find a home as well.
I think that a lot of the cards that we will see are the ones that have the most versatility. So, just looking at this Railway Brawler, for example, you think, oh, 5 mana, 5/5, that's terrible. But you could pay for free on turn 5 instead of paying 5 for it if you plot it. So, the plot mechanics, the spree cards, those will definitely be more prevalent than the big beaters that we may have seen in the streamer event.
Yeah, the one thing that I will definitely agree with you, sorry to interrupt you there, Blake,
but
is something like Railroad Brawler. Normally you think, okay, in Standard, everything's moving so fast, you can't take turn 4 off just to plot. But one scenario where it would be super advantageous is there's always these positions with green decks where you're playing against a deck that contains some kind of Wrath effect, and you're like, well, my battlefield already has 3 creatures. I have nothing else to play but creatures this turn. I don't want to overextend into this possible Sunfall. Instead, you plot, then they Sunfall, then you go Railroad Brawler, 2 3-drops, and all of a sudden your battlefield has 16 power, So something like that could be a really cool play pattern against a deck with sweepers.
Yeah. Corey, I do want to touch on Bristly Bill real quick because, and this was not my idea. This was in the Metagame article. But do you think it
not
could
a
be
Bristly Bill fan, Blake?
Oh, I'm a huge Bristly Bill fan. But I was wondering about you mentioned the Teamer deck earlier and how it loses to Rest in Peace. Do you think it could pivot with something like Bristly Bill since it gets those double landfall triggers from the sacrifice lands?
Yeah, that could be one of the 2-drops that really could make an impact. The one thing I would think the Teamer deck would need, along with Bristly Bill, is another good threat. Another good threat at 3, at the 3 converted mana cost spot, or 4. You're not going to just win a game alone by going turn 2 Bristly Bill, turn 3, one of the lands that puts 2 lands into play, attack for 4. While that is fine, you really do need the ability to have more follow-up threats. And the problem with transitioning from this over-the-top combo deck is really what this Teamer deck is, to an aggressive deck. Well, you're playing all lands that come into play tapped. So I think that's the puzzle that all these testing teams, I'm sure, are trying to solve or have already solved is, can this shell be transformed into an aggressive deck while still maintaining the mana base? And I don't know the answer to that, but Bristly Bill definitely could be one of the avenues. Or you just go really big and you play these giant creatures and hope to still control the mid game. I don't know. I'm scared for my poor Teamer deck, Blake.
Well, let's take a look at some of the rares that were the most played during that stream. And this one's gonna feel this is how you know it's just the data. We're just looking at data because there's some rare lands on this, which, of course.
That makes sense.
We
like to play many colors.
We do. We'll come back. We can come back to Smuggler's Surprise, but we should talk about Rush of Dread. And this is jumping ahead a little bit, Producer Sean. But there is a combo in Standard, Corey, with Rush of Dread and Bloodletter of Aklazat. There it is.
Yes.
How does this work? And do we think this is a real combo that could see play?
I would think right off the top of my head, probably not, because, well, one thing that you can do in response to the Rush of Dread's ability to, have them lose their life, you play Bloodletter on turn 4, plus then Rush on turn 5, presumably win the game. Now, the one thing, this creature can just be removed. It can just be go for the Throated, and then this combo is, a little lackluster. But if you're doing other things alongside this combo, that is just, I think Golgari Mid-range would be a perfect shell for this, where you're able to just have good creatures. and then all of a sudden you have this combo finish. And both of these cards on their own are okay. Rush of Dread, I think, is a little bit better than Bloodletter of Alkalots. Sorry, I'm sure I butchered that too. Aclazotz, thank you. So many Z's in that name, so yeah, that's tough. But just the creature itself, I don't think is powerful enough. But let me tell you, Rush of Dread is quite the Magic card. I don't know if either of you have had 3 creatures in play and 3 cards in hand when your opponent casts this for 6 unlimited. It's devastating.
Definitely have
sure.
not, yeah.
It's not fun, I'll tell you that.
Doesn't look fun.
Let's go back to the most played rares again. Do we expect anything out of Smuggler's Surprise?
This card's really cool. It's, again, one of the spree cards, which I think are crazy. The instant speed board wipe in white, I've forgotten what it's called now, but that one has killed me so many times in limited. Yeah. I am mad about it. But yeah, you were talking, Corey, about, you know, having the big beaters and just trying to win the game with, you know, raw power alone. The third ability on Smuggler's Surprise is a pretty great way to keep your guys alive, at least from destroy spells. Unfortunately, it doesn't get around everyone's favorite farewell. But, you know, just having that versatility there and being able to, at instant speed, chuck 2 things out of your hand onto the board and then probably still swing for lethal anyway. This is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting card. The instant speed putting in creatures so you don't have to overextend against a sweeper, I think would be the thing that has the highest chance to make it to standard. That being said, if you want to essentially trade up, as we call it, where you pay 6 mana to put more than 6 mana value into play, well, then you have to play more than 6 mana value creatures. You have to play some really big ones. Yeah, no kidding. One thing I would think would be the coolest is pair this with Atraxa. I think Atraxa, putting that into play at instant speed seems really, really strong. If you can find some deck like that goes over the top. That being said, once again, you're paying 6 mana for this, where you could just untap, pay Atraxa through Cavern of Souls or something like that. So I wouldn't think this is going to make a big impact, but it's definitely a sweet card.
It's fun. Good in Commander, I bet.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, absolutely. Surprise, 2 big creatures.
All right. Let's take a look at the most played commons and uncommons, and then we'll move on to some individual all-stars. Anything here that stands out to you as a possibility for standard constructed?
Shoot the Sheriff, I think, is probably going to just be a better go for the throat. I think there's not enough outlaws that are going to make it into standard here for this Pro Tour specifically. And Shoot the Sheriff has the ability to kill giant tokens off of Sunfall. I'm sure there's a couple other artifacts that it could kill. So maybe we see that replace or exchange for some go for the throats. The lands, I think, are not quite good enough because the crime synergy is great and limited. I don't think the crime stuff is going to port over into standard that much, and tap lands, are not the best. Make your own luck. I really hope there's a deck that take advantage of that. Some kind of ramp style deck where you can plot a gigantic card like an Atraxa. I think that could maybe make a home in Domain if you want that kind of card to be able to draw a couple extra cards. And then Forsaken Miner, we've seen these 1 mana 2/2 black creatures that have some way to come back from the graveyard be quite good at certain times in Standard's history. So I wouldn't be too shocked to see a Black X style deck that could just commit crime by, Thoughtseize style effects, removal to just bring this creature back. I would think Forsaken Miner has the highest chance to make it to standard.
It could fit into, like, if you really wanted to, Golgari or Dimir, with the amount of targeting they do.
And
Cavern Bats.
And just think, attack with 1 creature with Refrain, discard Forsaken Miner. Oh, baby. Ooh. The value. The value you get there. I mean,
much value.
Count me in.
Did I win that game? No, but I brought back so many miners.
But I drew a card off Rafine and then drew the card I discarded.
Amazing. All right. There are a few other cards. So we've talked about a bunch about DGA cards. There are still a few that we haven't talked about that maybe don't have an archetype yet or might. But let's jump ahead to 3 steps ahead. And yeah, so I'll admit, I was among those not super impressed. It looks like a cancel variant, and those are kind of a dime a dozen. But playing with this card, I've actually been super impressed. Do we think this has a spot?
Yeah, I think 3 steps ahead is incredible and limited. And I think if there is going to be a home in standard, Gabriel Nassif will find a way to be able to, tap 8 mana at end step to copy one of his mopey creatures that gain some value while countering a spell. And, maybe go from there in a Dimir style control deck or something like that. But in limited, this card I also thought maybe wasn't going to be amazing. But a 4 mana instant speed clone is something we just really have never had in Magic's history. So when you put all these medium-ish abilities together, I think the worst being the draw 2 cards, then discard a card. For 3 mana, you should be at the very least casting Divination, just drawing 2 cards. So you're not going to see that mode very often in limited. But just this card for 6 mana, being able to counter something and copy a spell, I think is absolutely incredible. And I'm here for this card in limited for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We already talked about Tiny Bones, so we're going to move past that. But there's another rare black creature that we haven't talked about that I think may have some legs, which is Karavek the Punisher.
Yeah, commit some crimes, make sure you what is it, you paid 2 life, right?
2 life, and
exile
basically
1.
Yeah, I saw this a bit in the streamer event. It pairs well with Tiny Bones, who also commits a crime when it hits. But I thought what was interesting about this card was a lot of these cards are cast a like instant or sorcery, but this is any black card.
Yeah, I think this card's
sweet.
pretty...
Love the versatility.
Yeah, I think this card is really interesting, and I think we'll probably find a nice shell in the Dimir style mid-range, or the Dimir or Esper. I think Esper seems to make a lot of sense. One deck that we always see pop up is this Esper Legends style deck, right? The ones with 4 Plaza of Heroes. It focuses more on casting the creatures. Its disruption is Urtai instead of maybe Go for the Throat. It's played Thalia in the past, even though I think that's probably not an option now. But if you go Rafine on turn 3 and you discard, even a Preacher of the Schisms, we'll say, or better yet, discard a Go for the Throat. And then on turn 4, you go Deep Cavern Bats, target your opponent. Well, that's a crime. Then you can pay 2, copy the Go for the Throat from your yard, kill their creature as well. And I'm not seeing... okay, you do exile the card, of course. I was going to say you can just keep doing that. But
that would be busted.
That's probably
Insta-badge.
good they took that out. Yeah. But like right there, that value is already quite unbelievable. You're getting a free Go for the Throat just because you discarded it off Rafine. Or bring back the Miner, like we were talking about after you discarded
that
Rafine.
Miner. So good. One thing that I saw, I was watching Ash Lizzle playing a Jund Legends deck. And, playing Tiny Bones joins up, Vraska joins up, Rakdos joins up, all of those with Laughing Jasper. I forgot his whole name. Laughing Jasper Flint. Yeah, stealing your opponent's stuff. And then basically the whole deck is just crimes. And it's pretty nutty. You get to play your opponent's cards. I like
that
it
sounds awesome. I've always been a big fan of Gonti, so anything that plays off your opponent's cards, I'm in.
And it's the Pro Tour, so their cards are going to be good.
Yeah.
You might as well play with theirs.
Yeah, that's the next level stuff here. Don't play good cards of your own. Just play cards, that take your opponent's cards and go from there. I think that's a strategy my brother used over and over in his career. He played mopey mid-range cards like Gonti that took the good cards from his opponent. He made a good career out of it.
The last black card I want to talk about is Insatiable Avarice, which is another
2/4.
spree card. And Insatiable Avarice is a black, and then the first mode is pay 2, and you can basically Vampiric Tutor, card at the top of your library. And then the second mode, you can pay 2 black, and target player draws 3 and loses 3 life. Mostly, I'm curious if you think this has any legs with Sheoldred, not only to let you offset the life loss with life gain, but also maybe to target your opponent and finish them off.
Wow, that does target your opponent, and they take 9.
They take 9. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen this card in the past be quite strong in Standard. Usually strong in the sense that it was early Standard, maybe 5-set Standard, 6-set Standard. With how many sets we have in Standard now, decks are just better. You usually don't see just traditional card draw spells, but Painful Truth used to be the essentially pay 3, draw 3, lose 3 type thing. And that was definitely played. It saw a lot of play. Being able to target your opponent for that last bit of reach, introducing Sheoldred into the equation, and then the 3 mana search your library, put a card on top is definitely not Standard worthy, not amazing right now, I would say. You do get to draw the card as well if you pay a full 5 mana for that, but in Standard, paying 5 mana to just draw a card, not affect the battlefield, it's probably not going to be good enough. But I like what you were saying, though, Blake. 3 mana with a Sheoldred out, you either get to offset the life loss or you get to deal them 9. I mean, 9 is a lot of life.
It is that's just a way to kill somebody, especially if you've had a Sheoldred in play for a turn cycle. Their life total's not going to be super high. So
yeah, that's true. I like that. That's a nice little combo. We could see that as a 1 or 2 of maybe or something. Yeah. Not crazy 4 of or anything, but
if only it was instant speed.
If only this card was strictly better. All right.
Yeah.
Now here's my perfectly smooth transition. Here's a card that would love some instant speed card draw to go along with it. Is Duelist of the Mind.
Hey.
I've been pretty impressed with this card so far, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've played this card in Limited, and it's been incredible there. It's been doing some nice work in Pioneer as well. And now, like you were saying earlier, Blake, the Mitgo tournament, the challenges, the finalists were 2 Esper decks that played either 3 or 4 of these as the 2-drop slot. So the natural curve of being able to play a 1-drop, either Spyglass Siren or Tiny Bones, into Duelist of the Mind, into Raffine, attack, draw 2 extra cards from Raffine. All of a sudden, this is 3 power on its own, plus the Raffine could give it 2 more. So you could be attacking for 6 on turn 3 if you discard 2 spells off Raffine. I mean, that's undeniable, how strong that is.
I did love Yuta Takahashi's response to this when it was revealed at the last Pro Tour. He's like, man, this could block my card. Fairy Mastermind doesn't win against this one. It was really funny.
Well, it looks like now Yuta has the ultimate, motivation to win again, to just make a 3/4 flyer that takes down Nathan's card. They're just going to go back and forth, keep power creeping their blue 2-drops up.
All right, and then the last cards I want to talk about. So we already talked about Rest in Peace, but I had wanted to talk about 2 sideboard cards. We talked about Rest in Peace quite a bit, but about hate it? How do you feel about Pest Control?
Ooh, yeah. Pest Control is really interesting. I don't think it will have a home in Standard unless it's a sideboard slot against the Convoke decks.
Yeah.
I think that could be a decent spot as a 1 of 2 of in these Esper mid-range decks. The problem with that is some of these decks play Spyglass Sirens. Some of them play tokens of their own. So, it does destroy all of those. But if you can find a good old-fashioned Esper style control deck, this is going to be the perfect card against Convoke. If they just go, turn 1 Thraben Inspector, go, turn 2 Gleeful Demolition, attack for 1, and you cast this on turn 2, your opponent has to drop from the tournament and just head home, so
that's actually
That's
in
powerful.
the tournament rules.
Yeah, they're gonna announce that rules, at the start of the Pro Tour. It's just required if you get blown out that badly. I think this card could be good in that kind of narrow sense. Maybe could be played in Domain as well, since they don't have any 1-drops or tokens besides Sunfall tokens. I think could have a home in sideboards for sure.
Makes sense. All right. Chat had one more card that they wanted to ask about. They asked if we had thoughts on the Rakdos Joins Up combo.
Okay.
Do you know what this combo is? I learned about it yesterday.
I don't know if I do. I have been seeing some Rakdos Joins Up on Twitter or something like that, but you might have to refresh me here.
So Rakdos joins up. And Rakdos joins up, and you're supposed to return. The clone Metamorph, the one that has Prototype. You return it. It can copy any permanent. It can copy Rakdos joins up. Then they legend rule. You sacrifice that, but you get a trigger to bring it back. And because it's a legendary creature. It deals damage equal to the power to target opponent. So if you can have Rakdos join, if you can have the Metamorph in play, I forget what it's called, cast Rakdos joins up, it's actually just infinite damage.
Yeah, that is spicy. See, those are the kind of combos that end up being really, really strong in Standard. These combos where you're already playing a pretty strong card and Rakdos joins up. The clone Metamorph is okay. I want to say it it's Prototype is 4, 2 colorless blue or something like that.
Here it is. Yeah,
Hulking Metamorph. That's
chat's got it. It involves Abuelo's Awakening. You need Abuelo's Awakening. Yes.
That's a lot of steps.
It is a lot of steps. And Corey, it uses the graveyard.
Yeah, so, Rest in Peace, definitely going to get some collateral damage on this style of deck. So I would think it's probably a little too cute. I think a lot of people are going to look at this combo and they're going to think exactly what you just said. These Rest in Pieces are not going away. They may shrink in numbers because all these teamer decks are so kind of afraid that you might see the testing teams that are kind of forward thinking being well, since everyone's so afraid of Rest in Peace, these teamer decks are not really going to be played. Therefore, I'm going to cut my Rest in Pieces. We've seen that happen in the past. And then the decks that, do play some kind of graveyard centric combo like this can actually sneak in. But I would think if you're playing this card and you're playing this combo, you better have this be your plan B. Or have a good plan B, still be doing some Rakdos mid-range stuff, have some Shield Rids, have, a decent aggressive plan. This on its own and just playing, Wrath removal spells, probably not good enough.
Yeah.
There's another combo too with Honest Rutstein. Frank Carson mentioned it in his article. Ray Zhang found it, I believe. If you control Relic of Legends and Rona, then 2 copies of Honest Rutstein, you can win the game with Tiny Bones joins up. Because every time you're bringing things back, you're just ding it, ding it, ding it, ding it, ding it, ding. So if you like pinging and you dislike combat damage, then here's your win conning combo.
Well, I know that one sounds like a lot of steps. Honest Rutstein, you need Rona, you need but honestly, there have been decks with that sort of shell that would just kind of naturally play a bunch of these cards. And so it's convoluted, but the deck functions without the combo. It's not like you're all in on it.
Yeah, so that's the thing you really want want to look for in a deck like that, I'll bring it back to like 4-color Copycat way back in the day of Standard, where it had Felgar Guardian, Saheeli Rai as the combo, but then you just had a lot of good energy creatures, Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso, Sky Sovereign, these kind of things that could win a fair game, where there's plenty of times you would just win without comboing, but you have this oops, I win button. Those are the decks that usually translate over into Standard quite well, and, you know, can be maybe too good, you know, at times. But I don't see any of those style combos being too present here for this Pro Tour, at least.
Yeah. If someone just wants to have a good time, we might see a combo.
We might. Yeah, we'll definitely be on the lookout. Well, if you want to check out the broadcast at home, you being at home, the broadcast starts this Friday. There we go. On the 26th, there's all the time zones. Well, 3 of the time zones. Pick which one you're closest to. Corey and Ali are going to be here, but we have a crack broadcast team for the Pro Tour. I think we have a graphic for that. A lot of the usual suspects here. There we go. We got, in addition to these two, we got Maria, we got Riley, we got Cedric, we got Marshall, Manny. Good crew, as usual. Definitely be sure to tune in this weekend and see who takes it. Before we go, Corey and Haley, give me any kind of prediction for this weekend. We already talked about Simon. What is one prediction that you can hold over everyone's head at the end of the weekend? Corey, let's.
You want to go first, Haley? Okay, all right.
Oh.
So I would think my prediction is that in the battle of Team Handshake and Team CFB Ultimate Guard, I think Team CFB Ultimate Guard is going to find a really powerful deck, and I think they are going to place higher than Team Handshake here. I think they're going to go back-to-back. Last year was all Team Handshake. I think they came back this year, and they're like really ready to cement themselves back at the top. And I think the team to beat, I think they're going to have a really good Pro Tour. I think they're going to find a very good deck, and their limited prep is always extremely strong. So that's my hot take.
All right,
well, you took mine too. So my prediction is along the same lines. But I think that there are going to be 2 members from Handshake and CFB in the top 8. Which 2? Right. I don't know, but that's
right. I got one last hot take, Blake. Somebody out there is gonna find a good transformational sideboard plan with this Teamer Analyst deck, please, so I can get back on the ladder with my precious Teamer deck. It's not fair that Rest in Peace has destroyed my favorite deck. Yeah. Honestly, smart.
Yeah, less a prediction, more a plea. Someone, please.
Yes.
Help Corey out.
You got a couple more days before deck submission. You got time.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Haley, for joining us and telling us all about Pro Tour Thunder Junction. Thanks everyone for tuning in.